Good morning, everybody. When Dror approached me and said, "Can you come and talk about compassionate conservation?" I said, "What? What do you mean compassion? How can you be compassionate?" I mean, we're in Israel, and we just talked this morning about a car sticker. Keen on killing? It's a big issue, and it's a challenging issue because, as you've seen, the development of conservation concepts is an evolutionary process. And definitely from working in an urban environment, it's clear that the approach has to be systematic, because we might be very keen on preserving the mountain gazelle, but if we were not working with the people who plan and manage, or the people who use the cars, or people who live in the vicinity of protected areas, we're fighting a losing battle. So what I'm going to try and share with you is some of my observations during a long period of observing mountain gazelles in Jerusalem, which is one of the projects I'm looking into. And just to give you a general baseline of what the gazelle is, here you can see the definition or the status of the gazella, which is vulnerable. And when you say a vulnerable species, we still have time, it's not urgent. But when you start looking into the specific species and you see the distribution of the gazella complex, and you see that we have a population that survived in Israel, it's basically very secluded. Meaning there's a good chance that the population that we have here in Israel is not the same one as in Saudi Arabia or the Persian Gulf or whatever remains in Jordan. Okay, and from genetic works that's been done during the last few years, this is a work done by Gila Kachila from the Hebrew University, you see that the mountain gazelle over here is basically probably a different species, and now people are talking about changing the status from vulnerable to endangered, because the estimate, and this is a radical estimate of 2,000 individuals, I think there's a larger number, but if we still have 5,000 gazelles in Israel, it's less than tigers in the world. That means it's a really vulnerable species, an endangered species. So there have been discussions now to change the status, and this might change soon. But most of my work is not scientific, it's observation. I usually do a lot of wildlife films. And one of the interesting things when you film gazelles in the wild or in peri-urban or urban environment is you see a very interesting evolutionary process that is usually more successful with little animals, and when larger animals like a mountain gazelle faces the challenges, it's a very interesting process, sometimes very, very dramatic, and there is a learning curve. Mountain gazelles adapt to a certain extent to urban and peri-urban habitats, but this is a sort of a downhill battle. So what you're going to see here are a few examples how these gazelles actually utilize open spaces in cities, how they react to different processes that happen in cities or in farmlands. And here you can see gazelles coming to feed early morning by the Chizme border crossing, where there's a division between the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. Now this area is very good because it's relatively open. You can see the gazelles take advantage and they come and play in the parking lots where the workers come and park, or people park their cars on the way into Jerusalem or out of Jerusalem. Okay, you can see those signs. The yellow signs are signs for Israelis warning them when they go into the Palestinian Authority. Okay, on the other side, Palestinians, if they don't have permit, they can't go in. But the interesting thing is that this area is a very, very critical point that influences the ecology of these gazelles. And you can see that the ratio here of adults and young is pretty good. I mean, there are ecologists in the room. You can see that this is a nice fine herd. Okay, females, fawns, even suckling. Look at the vegetation, plenty of food. Okay? Now, I'm a compassionate person, and I own a beautiful mutt called Lulu. She's 13 years old. She can hardly see. She has hearing problems, and I really love her. And when I watch this film, I remember her waiting for me at home because she looks like one of these dogs, and something like that. That's even more like her. But when we go out to play, she still smells the gazelles. She smells wildlife. She has a lot of the traits of a wild animal. And one of the amazing things that happens in Jerusalem, and not only in Jerusalem, all over the country, is that feral dogs are basically partially immune in Israel. They have a lot of protection. And we heard by the previous speaker about welfare and conservation. And sometimes we see that animal welfare affects wildlife, and we don't have equality between them because people are more connected to dogs because more people own dogs and see dogs in the cities, and they're not aware of the effects of feral dogs and gazelles because not many people own gazelles or play with gazelles or watch gazelles. Now, the effect of feral dogs on the gazelle population is very severe. And what I've documented here is basically how feral dogs use man-made structures such as fences, roads, to capture gazelles. And this has a tremendous effect on the gazelle population in Israel. Now, we are not expecting to see less roads being built. And watch the gazelle running from the right. The black dog, the leader hunter, is already underneath the road. So here you can see documentation, first of all, that shows that the technique is very well mastered by feral dogs. You can also see, surprisingly, that the gazelle, look at the gazelle on the right, instead of climbing up on the road, goes inside, underneath a road, which is something that's not very expected by such an antelope. And luckily, in this case, this gazelle managed to escape the hunt. Okay, you can see the rest of the pack running along, assured that there's a meal at the end of the tunnel. Okay, so this is a very, very common phenomenon. It's very hard to document because it happens very, very quickly, but this happens on a regular basis. Most time when we find gazelles that are been hit by a car on roads, it's usually because they were predated or chased by feral dogs. Okay, so this one was a lucky gazelle and some unlucky feral dogs. Now this is a pack of feral dogs that I documented very close to the checkpoint, and this group actually specialized in herding gazelles into a secluded area, a narrow area, where they could hunt the gazelles. And this is a technique that you still find in the Arava Valley. What we have, we call them afifonim. In English, they're called kites. I don't know. These are old structures that were used and devised by people who lived there thousands of years ago to hunt gazelles. So this happens nowadays, and you see how these dogs use the neighborhood on one side, the security fence on the other side, a road at the end, and this is how they catch their prey. Now, this group had pups, so the diet of these pups consisted of hyrax that were caught in the rocky areas that were created by the buildings, and by gazelles that use the good grazing areas by the roads and by the fence. So you can see these pups already are growing into this type of hunting technique. This is a very impressive way to see how a young pup gets the taste of wild food and wild gazelle. This is a young gazelle. Now it's not only about man-made structures. This is something much more traditional or wolf-like behavior, where wild dogs or feral dogs use weather to hunt gazelles. And here you can see a snowy day in Jerusalem, where packs of feral dogs come from the vicinity and hunt for gazelles. And you can see the way that gazelles react, how the dogs react. And because I only have 5 minutes left, I'll try to elaborate on what I see as an important approach for conservation. Mankind is going to expand. Development is expanding in an exponential rate. So the systematic approach is crucial. And when I say systematic, we should not neglect the old or more conservative ways of conservation, which are protected areas. They're still very important. We see them in the Arava Valley, in the Golan, in some areas in Central Israel, but less and less. The median approach, which we see from Europe, creating a much more elaborate system, including agricultural areas, is very important. And when we see cities as a small mosaic, that's a very, very novel approach, risky in many cases, but in intensified areas, it's very important. And I can share with you that I heard lately that London is promoting a new concept of making London a national park. That means the whole metropolitan area will be treated and managed in a holistic approach, meaning open spaces, built-up areas will get the same treatment by the same people. And one of the things we're trying to do in Israel nowadays is bringing over the responsibility on wildlife and conservation to the people who manage the city, meaning the municipality will be in charge on the, we call it natural infrastructure, in the management process and also in the social structure of the city. So this is basically a concept we're trying to work on, and what I try to show you today is basically the challenges we have. So it's not, when you say compassionate, sometimes, you know, the pictures are tough, and I'm not sure compassion is applicable when we don't have time on our hands. So we have to be compassionate, but we should still keep all the tools in our toolbox to make sure that at the end of the road, or as we advance, we still have gazelles roaming around our cities and in our open spaces. Thank you very much.